Why was she always the one people underestimated? Felt the wind scrape against her face, sharp as glass. The Montana stretched before her, endless and untamed, a wilderness that had shaped her bones long before she knew what a world beyond ranch fences even looked like. She pressed her cheek against the wooden stock of the rifle, her grandfather's old Winchester .270, and inhaled slowly. Her breath fogged against the October air, vanishing in the pine-scented gusts. At 19, she shouldn't have known how to do what she was about to attempt. Nobody should, but she felt it deep in her chest, the invisible mathematics of distance, the arc of bullet through air, the whisper of pressure systems carried in her blood like some secret inheritance. Beside her, Sam Reeves squinted through binoculars, shaking his head. 1,200 yards, he muttered, almost laughing at the absurdity. No way in hell you're making that shot, Em, not in this wind. She didn't answer. Words would break the stillness, disturb the fragile equation she held inside. Instead, she counted the rhythm of her pulse. 1, 2, slow. Her finger curled against the trigger, finding the delicate point where force could tip into release. Time stretched, the world hushed. The rifle cracked. Through her scope, she watched the buck collapse instantly, legs folding beneath it as if gravity itself had chosen that moment to claim him. The clearing went silent. Sam lowered his binoculars, mouth hanging open. "Jesus Christ," he whispered. That's not even possible." Stood, sliding the rifle over her shoulder with practiced ease. "We better get him before the coyotes do," she said, her voice flat. But inside she felt the old stirring again, the question she never dared ask aloud. Why could she see what others could? Why did the world slow when she aimed? As they hiked across the valley, Sam kept glancing at her with the uneasy awe of someone who just witnessed something unnatural. "You know nobody makes shots like that, right? Not guides, not snipers. Nobody." She forced a smile. "Guess I just got lucky." But luck had nothing to do with it. By the time the sun dipped low, stretching long golden shadows across ranch, arms ached from carrying venison quarters. 3,000 acres of land lay spread around her, a rugged inheritance carved by generations. It had once thrived with cattle and wheat, but years of drought had cracked the earth, starved the pastures, and hollowed the legacy into something brittle. Her father, Robert, waited on the porch. His weathered face carried the lines of pride and worry, the look of a man who had fought nature too long and lost more than he won. Beside him leaned her brother Michael, 16 and restless, still stretching into manhood. "Nice buck," Robert said, nodding. "Saw you take the truck out at dawn. Where'd you get him?" "North Ridge," answered, leaving out the impossible distance. Later, around the dinner table, the stew tasted like ash in her mouth. Her mother placed an envelope beside Robert's plate with quiet ceremony. The silence that followed was heavier than any prayer. "It's from the bank," she said. Robert's hands trembled as he opened it. His jaw hardened with each line he read. Finally, he set the letter down. "They're moving up the foreclosure," he said flatly. 60 days, then they take the ranch." The words cut sharper than winter wind. Stared at her bowl, unable to swallow. This ranch wasn't just land, it was memory, blood, the marrow of her family. To lose it was to lose herself. "I could delay college," she said quietly. "Work in town, help." Robert shook his head, forcing firmness into a voice that cracked. "Your scholarship's your future. We'll figure this out here." But she heard the lie. He didn't believe it. None of them did. That night retreated to the barn, her sanctuary of oiled steel and worn wood. Rifles lined the walls, each one cleaned and maintained with almost religious devotion. She sat at the bench, disassembling her Winchester, letting the ritual calm her racing thoughts. But peace didn't come. When she dragged a crate aside to reach her supplies, she noticed a loose floorboard. Curiosity had opened. Beneath lay a metal box coated in dust thick as years. The latches groaned open, revealing relics of a past no one had told her about. Photographs, insignia, a folded flag, a journal bound in cracked leather. And a name. Property of Sergeant James, U.S. Army Special Operations, Project. Her breath caught, her grandfather, the man she had never known. The journal was filled with dense notes, ballistic equations, sketches, cryptic mission references, operations called Emerald Sight, Broken Arrow, pages thick with knowledge that felt like scripture written in numbers. "What are you doing?" Her father's voice froze her. He stood in the doorway, pale, almost stricken. "I found this under the floorboard," said, holding up the journal. "It was Grandpa's." Robert crossed the room in 3 strides, snatching it from her hands with a ferocity that startled her. "You shouldn't be reading this." "Dad, what was Project? Was Grandpa some kind of sniper?" His jaw clenched. For a moment something raw flickered in his eyes, fear, maybe, or grief. "That's classified," he said finally. "Information that died with him, and it should have stayed buried." He left with the box, leaving in the barn with the echo of questions she couldn't silence. But one thing had changed. She had seen enough to know her family carried secrets far heavier than droughts or debts. That night, as she lay awake, listening to the coyotes howl across the valley, she felt it again, the weight of something pulling her forward. A legacy not chosen but inherited, a gift, a curse. And somewhere deep inside, she already knew. The shot she had made today wasn't the last time the world would ask her to do the impossible. Because blood remembers, even when families try to forget. Why did her father look like he had aged 10 years overnight? When walked into the kitchen before dawn, Robert sat at the table with the journal and the metal box spread open before him. His calloused hands trembled around a coffee mug. The morning light hadn't even touched the horizon, yet he looked exhausted, as though carrying secrets that had finally grown too heavy. "You couldn't sleep either?" she asked softly. His eyes lifted, bloodshot, weary but resolute. "Sit down, Em. There are things I should told you a long time ago." Her pulse quickened. She slid into the chair across from him, the journal's cracked leather whispering history between them. "Your grandfather," Robert began, his voice low, almost reverent. "He wasn't just a soldier. During the Cold War, the CIA created something called Project. They searched for people with rare abilities, men who could process the world differently. Ballistics, distance, wind, all the calculations that normally take instruments or computers. They could feel them, instinctively." Froze, every impossible shot she had ever made, every moment when the world seemed to slow into solvable math, now had a name. Grandpa was one of them. Robert nodded slowly. James was their best, the kind of man who could change history with a single round, and they used him. Missions across Eastern Europe, Cuba, places even now I'm not supposed to talk about. Leaned forward. "Then why does the family act like he was just some rancher who died in an accident?" "Because the official story is easier to live with," Robert wanted to say, but his jaw tightened instead. He turned a page of the journal, his eyes caught on the scrawled equations, the sketches of terrain, the cryptic mission. "The truth is," he whispered, "he didn't die in training, he was betrayed." Her stomach nodded. By who? Before Robert could answer, the crunch of tires on gravel broke the stillness. Through the window, saw headlights cut through the pre-dawn mist. A black SUV pulled up, engine idling. Her father's face drained of color. "They found us," he muttered. The door opened. A tall man, gray-haired and rigid with the posture of someone who had lived his entire life in uniform, stepped out. He moved with precision, every stride clipped, efficient. Even at 70, his presence radiated command. Robert stood abruptly, gathering the box, shoving the journal closed. "Stay here," he ordered, his tone sharp. But she rose anyway, following him to the porch. The stranger stopped at the steps, eyes sharp as steel. "Robert." Her father said coldly, "Not long enough." His gaze flicked between them. The man's uniform was gone, but his bearing betrayed decades of military service. His eyes landed on her and softened, just slightly. "This must be your daughter," he said. "She has James's eyes." Robert stepped forward, blocking the view between them. "Leave my family out of this." The older man exhaled, as though burdened with truths too long carried. "I'm not here officially. I'm retired, but I keep track of certain names, and word reached me that someone was asking questions about Project." "How the hell would you know that?" Robert snapped. "Because I've spent 40 years hunting down every man connected to what happened to James." His gaze slid back to, "You found the journal, didn't you?" Felt her father's warning glance cut into her, but she nodded anyway. "And you knew my grandfather?" "I was his spotter, his partner." The man's voice cracked just for a second. "I was supposed to be with him in Cuba. They separated us, sent me on a false mission. By the time I realized, he was already gone." His chest tightened. The thought of her grandfather, alone, betrayed, ambushed, pressed like a stone against her ribs. Her father's voice was sharp. "Don't listen to him, Em. He's part of the same system that got James killed." "No," said firmly. "I've spent my life trying to expose that system, and now it's coming for her." Silence stretched. The wind whistled against the porch rafters. "What do you mean?" asked finally. "Project never died. It became Eagle Eye. Same program, new name. They're still out there, still searching for people like your grandfather. And when you found that journal, you lit up every alarm they've been watching for decades." His eyes bored into hers. "They know about you, and they will come." Robert's jaw tightened, fury laced with fear. "Get off my property." But couldn't look away from, because deep down she knew he was right. That night, long after SUV had disappeared down the dirt road, she sat alone on the porch swing. The business card he had pressed into her hand weighed heavy in her pocket, 10 digits, no name, no agency. Her family slept, but's mind raced. The foreclosure notice, the mysterious program, her grandfather's betrayal. And the impossible truth: she wasn't just a ranch girl who could shoot. She was part of something older, darker. She dialed the number. It rang 3 times before his voice answered. "I figured you'd call," he said. "Tell me about," she whispered. "Not over the phone. Tomorrow, 10 a.m. Willow Creek Diner, alone." Her father didn't notice when she slipped out the next morning. She drove into town, her hands tight on the steering wheel, her heart slamming against her ribs. The diner smelled of burnt coffee and frying bacon. Sat in a corner booth, posture stiff, eyes scanning every face like a man who had never stopped living in combat. Up close could see the tremor in his hands, the years etched into his skin. But his eyes remained sharp, hawk-like. "Your grandfather was the best shot I ever saw," he began without preamble. "But the Soviets had their own program. They called it Artemis. An arms race fought not with bombs but with people like him, people who could make impossible shots." Leaned forward. "And you think I'm one of them?" "I don't think, I know. It runs in families. They called it the Artemis gene. 1 in 10 million maybe, but it skips generations. Your father doesn't have it. You do." Her coffee sat untouched. She didn't dare move, afraid the weight of his words would shatter if she breathed too hard. Slid a photograph across the table. 2 young soldiers, arms slung over each other's shoulders, grinning in uniforms that looked far too heavy for their youth. One of them was James. "I should have died with him," said quietly. "But I didn't, and I've spent 40 years trying to make that mean something." Studied her grandfather's face, the same eyes she saw in the mirror every morning, and felt a pull she couldn't ignore. "What do you want from me?" she asked. His voice was calm, but his words carried a gravity that chilled her. "I want you to finish what he started." Her hands trembled around the photograph. Because deep inside, she knew this wasn't about choice anymore. It was about blood, about inheritance, about secrets buried so deep they had poisoned every generation since. And now those secrets had found her. What price would you pay to save the place that made you who you are? Drove back from the diner with the photograph of her grandfather burning a hole in her pocket. The dirt road to ranch seemed longer than ever, every fence post like a marker of a vanishing legacy. By the time she pulled into the yard, her decision pressed against her chest like the weight of the rifle she had carried since childhood. Her father was repairing a fence line, hammering nails into weathered posts. The sound of metal on wood rang sharp in the quiet air. He looked up when she approached, and one glance at her face told him everything. "You met with again," he said, "not a question." His throat tightened. "Dad, I need you to listen. There's a program." "No," his voice was harsh, final. "You know what happened to your grandfather. You're not walking into the same trap. This is different." Different, he threw the hammer down, eyes blazing. "They used James. They lied to him, then they killed him. And you want to sign yourself over to the same machine." She fought the sting of tears. "Dad, we're out of options. The ranch is dying. The foreclosure. If it means keeping you alive, I'll watch this land burn to dust." The silence between them stretched, heavy as the Montana sky. Finally she stepped closer, her voice low. "I'm not doing this just for the ranch. I'm doing it for me, for Grandpa, for answers you've kept from me my whole life." Robert's face cracked, the anger folding into something raw and broken. "You think answers will fix this? They won't. They'll eat you alive." That night the family sat around the table in tense silence, asked careful questions about what it heard. Michael stayed quiet, but his eyes lingered on her with something new, respect, maybe fear. Spoke softly. "I've made up my mind. I'm joining the program." Her father turned away, staring out the window as if he couldn't bear to watch the decision take root. "Then you better know what you're stepping into," he muttered. For the first time, felt the ground shift beneath her. She was no longer just a ranch girl holding onto a dying inheritance. She was stepping into a current that had begun decades before she was born. 3 days later, she stood at Fort, Maryland. The base looked more like a research hospital than a military installation, its clean hallways humming with fluorescent lights and footsteps that echoed too loudly. Men in uniforms brushed shoulders with technicians in lab coats, clipboards held like shields. Lieutenant Colonel James greeted her with the politeness of a man who had learned how to hide calculation behind courtesy. Salt and pepper hair, a soldier's build, a voice measured to the exact decibel of control. "Miss," he said, "your shooting scores are impressive, but they're only the beginning." She followed him through security checkpoints into a facility deeper than she had imagined. There were labs filled with equipment she couldn't name, corridors lined with reinforced doors. Cameras tracked her every step. "This is Eagle Eye," explained. "We identify individuals with rare neurological markers, natural shooters, people who can make the impossible routine." Forced her voice to stay steady. "And how many make it through?" "Few," said simply. 1 in 1,000 pass the first phase. Fewer still survive the training." Hours blurred into a gauntlet of tests. Eye-tracking exercises. Neurological scans that lit her brain in colors she couldn't understand. Simulated firing ranges where holographic targets darted through city streets and mountain ridges. At each step felt the strange shift within her, the quiet clarity that had haunted her since childhood. Time slowed. Equations wrote themselves across her mind. Shots landed exactly where she knew they would. Technicians whispered as they studied monitors. Words like unprecedented and anomalous passed between them. By the time she stepped into the shooting range, exhaustion burned her muscles. Yet something inside her thrummed alive. A voice cut across the echoing space. "So this is the Montana farm girl." Turned, a tall man in his 20s approached, confidence carved into every step. His handshake was too firm, his smirk too practiced. "Mason Walker," he said, "current record holder." His tone carried the smugness of someone who expected her to fail. "Don't get too comfortable," she replied quietly. The range came alive with targets 500 meters, then 800, then 1,200 in crosswind simulated by machines. Walker stood nearby, arms crossed, eyes watching. Let her breathing fall into rhythm, her body surrendering to the instinct she had never been able to explain. Shot after shot rang out, each one perfect. At 2,500 meters, the room fell silent as her bullet struck dead center, shattering Walker's standing record on her first attempt. The technician stared, leaned forward, his expression taut with awe. Walker's smirk faltered into something harder to name, anger, maybe respect. "Beginner's luck," he muttered, but knew better. When the session ended, she was led to a quiet conference room. The air smelled sterile, like secrets. Another man waited there, older, dressed not in uniform but in a suit that seemed deliberately unmarked. His presence radiated quiet power. "Miss," he said smoothly, "I'm Director Lawrence." The name froze her blood. Warning came back instantly. This was the man tied to her grandfather's death. She forced her face to remain calm as he extended a hand. "Your performance today," said, "has implications beyond anything we've seen before. In 30 years, I've never encountered someone with your potential." Set a folder on the table. Inside, saw medical scans, genetic charts, her own name stamped in red across documents she couldn't decipher. "The Artemis gene," explained. "Rare, exceptional. It allows your brain to process the environment like no ordinary person can. You inherited it directly from your grandfather." Swallowed, feigning surprise. "I was told he died in a training accident." Smile was polite, rehearsed. That was the official record. The truth remains complicated. He slid a contract across the table. "Eagle Eye would like to offer you immediate enrollment. A signing bonus of $120,000. Training in Nevada. From there, specialized deployments." Stared at the paper. She thought of her father's broken face, her mother's weary eyes, her brother's silence. She thought of the foreclosure notice, ticking like a bomb on the kitchen table back home. And she thought of warning her, "They'll use you like they used him." She looked up, forcing steel into her voice. "I'll need time to think." "Of course," said, though the smile in his eyes didn't reach the corners. "But offers like this don't wait forever." That night in her barracks, the walls seemed to close in. She stared at the contract, the promise of money, training, answers. Her phone buzzed, an unknown number. "They made the offer, didn't they?" His voice rasped on the line. Swallowed. "You were right about everything, even." "Then listen carefully," said. "You're not just signing a contract. You're stepping into a game they've been playing for decades. Accept, but play it slow. Appear reluctant. That's the only way you'll survive." Closed her eyes. The path stretched before her, dangerous and unavoidable. She could feel the weight of her grandfather's shadow, the pull of her family's desperation, the burning need for truth. In the end, her choice was not really a choice at all. The next morning she signed. And as the ink dried, stepped out of the ranch life that had defined her, and into a world built on secrets, betrayals, and the ghosts of impossible shots. What kind of place doesn't exist on a map? Pressed her forehead against the small plane's window as the Nevada desert unfolded below, an endless ocean of sand and rock, barren and merciless. The ranch in Montana felt like another world. The scent of pine, the sting of winter air. Here, everything looked and ancient, as if time itself had given up. Beside her sat 3 other recruits, each silent, each carrying their own secrets. The hum of the engines filled the cabin, broken only by the occasional cough or shift of boots on metal floor. "Welcome to nowhere," muttered the young man across from her, his red winters. Blonde hair cut close, posture straight, military, she guessed. "Hope you weren't expecting luxury." Said nothing. She had learned early that silence carried farther than words. The plane banked hard. Below, out of the desert heat shimmer, a compound appeared, low, sand-colored buildings, a landing strip carved from the wasteland, fences glinting under sun. It looked like it had grown out of the dust, a mirage made real. The transport jolted as it touched down. Heat slammed into the second the hatch opened, dry and punishing. She shouldered her duffel, sweat already slick on her neck. A woman in combat fatigue strode toward them. Everything about her radiated precision. Her steps, her clipped voice, the way her eyes measured each recruit like inventory. "Captain Victoria Blackwood," she announced. "Welcome to Nighthawk Facility. You have 30 seconds to form up. Your evaluation begins now." The 4 recruits scrambled into a line, glanced sideways, catching fragments of who she'd be measured against. Winters, sharp and rigid. Muscular, movements efficient, special forces maybe. And a petite woman with calm, unreadable eyes, hands steady even in the desert heat. "You've been selected for the most advanced marksmanship program in existence," Blackwood said, packing before them. "Over the next 8 weeks, we'll determine whether you possess not only ability but judgment, discipline, and resilience. Most of you will fail. That is not a possibility. It is a certainty." A Humvee rumbled to a stop nearby. The driver's door opened, and stomach tightened. Mason Walker. His smirk was smaller than at Fort, but the arrogance was the same. "Candidates, this is Senior Operator Mason Walker," Blackwood announced. "Your primary instructor." Walker's eyes landed on, recognition sparking. "Farm girl," he said with a nod. "Didn't expect you'd survive the trip." Blackwood cut him off sharply. "This squad will be referred to as Artemis. Artemis 1 Winters, Artemis 2, Artemis 3, Artemis 4. The names locked into place like rifle bolts. Artemis 4. The recruits were led inside the compound, barracks stripped of comfort, lockers of steel, beds with thin mattresses, phones confiscated, outside communication severed. "This facility doesn't exist," Blackwood told them. "Neither do you while you're here." Found herself rooming with. The woman's movements were precise, every fold of clothing neat, every item stowed in exact place. When she finally glanced up, her gaze lingered. "You must be," she said evenly, "the one Walker already knows." Nodded, unpacking what little she'd brought. "I'm added Army Intelligence." "Montana Ranch," replied. One of his brows lifted slightly. "No military background, interesting." Gave nothing more. But the silence didn't last. A knock at the door cut through the moment. Walker's voice barked, "Artemis 4, Command Center, now." Followed him through corridors lined with keypads and cameras. At the heart of the facility, the command center buzzed with activity, maps, live feeds, rows of analysts. A glass-walled conference room waited at the rear. Inside stood, and her stomach turned. Mess greeted smoothly, "Please sit." She forced her expression neutral as she obeyed. His presence here meant one thing, personal interest. He didn't bother with recruits unless they were important to his plans. "Your genetic analysis confirmed what we suspected," said, sliding a folder across the table. "You carry the Artemis Alpha variant, extremely rare, 1 in 30 million. Stared at the charts, lines and sequences she barely understood. Alpha variant, words that sounded like destiny or like a sentence. "You are not just exceptional," said softly. "You are singular, which is why your training will be customized." Customized, a word that sounded like privilege but felt the trap inside it. "You'll train with Artemis Squad," added, "but you'll also undergo individual conditioning. Techniques adapted from Project, methods once used on your grandfather." Kept her face still, but inside her pulse thudded. Grandpa, always circling back, always just out of reach. "I'll do whatever's required," she said carefully. "Good," murmured, his eyes unreadable. "I have high expectations, miss. Don't disappoint me." That night sat on her bunk staring at the ceiling, pretended not to watch her, snored from the other room. Winters scribbled in a notebook. The desert wind howled against the walls. Her father's voice haunted her, "Trust no one." The next morning began before dawn. Blackwood drove them through a brutal run across desert sand, lungs burning, legs heavy. "Marksmanship isn't about fingers and triggers," she barked. "It's about mastering your body when it wants to quit, controlling breath under stress, focusing when every muscle screams." Boots filled with dust. Sweat stung her eyes. But she kept going, remembering the long days of ranch work, the kind of endurance born not from gyms but from necessity. After the run came classrooms, ballistics theory, environmental science, charts of how air pressure, humidity, and temperature bent bullets across distance. For most, it was math, for it felt like memory, something she already knew. Afternoons belonged to the ranges. Walker waited, rifles ready. His smirk had hardened into something else, a mask hiding questions. 500 meters, he said. Standard rifle, perfect conditions. Lay prone, settled into position. Breath, trigger, 5 shots, all perfect. 800, Walker barked. Crosswind's word to life, adjusted, 5 more perfect. 1,200. The air shimmered with simulated heat. Heartbeat slowed, 5 clean hits. Walker's jaw tightened, 2,000 full complexity. The wind screamed, lights shifted, targets swayed. Let the noise fall away until the world narrowed to the single fragile thread connecting her eye to the bullet's arc. 5 shots, 5 hits. The range fell silent. Winters glanced at disbelief plain, tilted her head, studying with an analyst's eye. Walker's face stayed locked, but his eyes betrayed him. Shock, unease, maybe fear. "Adequate," he said coldly. That evening cleaned her rifle in the armory alone, or so she thought. Walker appeared in the doorway, arms folded. "How did you do it?" "Didn't look up." "Do what?" 2,000 meters, grouping like that, it's not possible." He stepped closer, his voice low, stripped of arrogance. "Not even with the Artemis gene. I've been shooting my whole life. Special forces, years of training, and I couldn't do what you just did." Met his eyes. "Then maybe you've been aiming at the wrong things." For the first time, Walker didn't smirk. He looked unsettled. "Get some rest," he muttered. "Tomorrow we'll see where you break." Returned to her bunk, rifle cleaned, mind racing. They wanted to push her, break her, rebuild her. But she knew one thing with absolute certainty. She was her grandfather's granddaughter, and whatever secrets this place held, whatever wanted from her, she would find them. Even if it meant being broken first. What if the shot you fired didn't come from the rifle in your hands, but from the ghosts in your blood? By the second week at Nighthawk, exhaustion no longer registered as pain. It was simply the air they breathed. His body ached in places she didn't know existed. The desert heat stripped skin raw. The silence of the facility at night carried whispers of failure, of those who had already broken and been quietly removed. But it wasn't the runs or the shooting ranges that unsettled her most. It was the room in the West Wing. A door marked only with a number, 47. Captain Blackwood led her there one evening after the others had been dismissed. The corridor hummed with fluorescent lights, cameras tracking every step. At the door, Blackwood stopped, her eyes hard but not unkind. "You're not here because of your marksmanship," she said. "That's just the surface. What Eagle Eye was built for is something deeper." "Swallowed, and what's in there?" "Memory activation," Blackwood replied. "Neural recall, don't fight it, don't give in to it either, survive it." The door hissed open. Inside, the room was small, sterile, lit only by a chair and a bank of machines. Electrodes dangled like spiders from the ceiling. A technician in a lab coat gestured toward the chair. Sat, cold gel smeared her temples as electrodes adhered to her skin. Straps tightened across her wrists and chest. The technician murmured instructions she barely heard. Then the hum began. Electric pulses rippled through her skull, subtle at first, then sharper, threading sparks across her vision. Her heartbeat thundered. The walls dissolved. And she was no longer in Nevada. She stood in a jungle. Humid air clung to her skin. Insects screamed in the canopy. A rifle weighed heavy in her hands, not her Winchester, but an M21, scope fogged with sweat. Ahead through the green, her grandfather's voice. "Hold steady," he whispered. "Breathe." She froze. He was there, James, the man she had never met, standing as real as dawn. Tall, broad-shouldered, uniform soaked with rain, eyes fierce and kind. "This isn't real," she whispered. His hand pressed her shoulder. Solid, warm. "Does it matter?" Gunfire erupted. Figures moved through the jungle, Soviet uniforms blurred by rain. James crouched, steadying his rifle. "Target 2 o'clock," he said. "Wind left at just half a mil." Her body obeyed before her mind could protest. She aimed, fired. The soldier dropped. "Good," James said, pride in his voice. The scene shifted violently. Now a rooftop in Havana. Searchlights swept the harbor. James lay prone beside her, whispering numbers, distances, angles. Again her rifle cracked. Another impossible shot. The world spun. Scene after scene flashed, mountains, deserts, city streets. Always James beside her. Always the impossible made routine. Until the last one. A crumbling warehouse. Night. James stood alone, rifle raised, breathing steady. "Stay back," he told her. Through her scope she saw them, 4 men closing in, their movements too precise, too rehearsed. Americans, not Soviets. One of them barked into a radio. "Confirmed. Terminate." James fired once, twice. 2 men dropped, but the third slipped behind him. A muzzle flash lit the dark. James staggered. "No!" screamed. She tried to run to him, but her legs wouldn't move. Her body locked, frozen in the nightmare. She could only watch as James collapsed, blood soaking his chest. He looked up at her, his voice a rasp. "Finish it, M." The world went white. When she came back, she was strapped to the chair, chest heaving, sweat pouring down her face. Blackwood stood over her, unreadable. "What did you see?" the captain asked. His voice shook. "My grandfather, his missions, his death." Blackwood's gaze sharpened. "Details." 4 men whispered. "American, he was betrayed." Blackwood exchanged a glance with the technician. A flicker of confirmation or alarm. "You'll undergo this procedure twice a week," Blackwood said. "The memories are encoded in your neural pathways. They're not hallucinations, they're inheritance." Stomach turned. "You mean I'm reliving his life?" "Not exactly," Blackwood said. "You're accessing residual imprints, patterns passed genetically. Eagle Eye believes knowledge can be carried like blood." Tore the electrodes from her temples, anger rising. "You're saying I didn't earn this, that I'm just repeating him." Blackwood's voice softened just for a moment. "Or maybe you're finishing what he couldn't." That night sat awake in her bunk, staring at the desert moon through the narrow window. Watched quietly from across the room. "You cried out in your sleep," said. "Name's James." Looked at her sharply. Didn't press, she only said, "Be careful. They're not just training you, they're using you." The next day, the regimen intensified. Live-fire exercises with moving targets at distances recruits whispered were impossible. Simulations of urban chaos, civilians screaming, enemies blending into crowds, decision-making under impossible pressure. But every time raised her rifle, she felt it, the ghost of her grandfather steadying her hand. His voice whispering calculations only she could hear. It wasn't skill anymore, it was memory. Walker noticed. After one exercise, he cornered her outside the range. His eyes were sharp, stripped of arrogance. "They're feeding you something," he said. "No one shoots like that, not without." He stopped himself. Whatever they're doing to you, it's not training, it's programming. His pulse spiked. What do you know about? His eyes widened, then narrowed. Where did you hear that? Answer me. Walker glanced around, lowering his voice. There were rumors, old program before my time, men who could see wind, distance, time itself, supposed to be shut down, but Eagle Eye, he stopped, shaking his head. Forget it, you don't want to know. Leaned closer, her voice hard. I already do. For the first time, Walker looked at her not as a rival, but as someone trapped in the same cage. Later that week, returned to the facility. His presence set everyone on edge. The man moved like a shadow given flesh, always calm, always smiling, always watching. He called into his office. The room was too quiet, too polished, a place where truth felt out of place. I hear the activation sessions are progressing, he said. Kept her face neutral. They're intense. He leaned back, studying her. Do you know why your grandfather died? Her breath caught, but she forced her voice steady. They told me it was an accident. Smiled thinly. History is full of accidents. His eyes glinted with something darker. But some accidents are necessary. Remember that, miss. You're here not to uncover the past. You're here to rewrite the future. When left his office, her hands trembled. She thought of James's dying words. Finish it. But finish what? A mission, a war, or the truth buried so deep it had already claimed one life. That night, lying awake in the barracks, realized something chilling. Eagle Eye wasn't training her. They were awakening her. And once she was fully awake, there would be no going back. How far can you bend before you break? By the fourth week at Nighthawk, felt like her mind belonged more to the ghosts of the past than to herself. Every activation session tore pieces from her. Each time, she woke in the chair drenched in sweat, heart hammering, vision blurred. Each time, her grandfather's voice felt less like memory and more like possession. But Eagle Eye didn't care. They only cared about results. That morning, Artemis' squad stood on the range under a merciless desert sun. Blackwood paced before them, her voice cutting through the heat. Today isn't about precision, it's about pressure, split-second decisions, one wrong choice and civilians die. Targets appeared without warning, pop-ups shaped as combatants, hostages, children, enemies in disguise. At random intervals, Blackwood barked commands. Red shirt, left corner. Civilian, don't shoot. Blue hat, hostile, take the shot. His body obeyed with uncanny speed. Her rifle cracked, targets dropped. Sweat blurred her eyes but not her aim. Then a new figure rose, a man holding a child. Blackwood's command was sharp. Hostile, neutralize. Froze. Through her scope she saw the man's face. It wasn't the cutout of an enemy. It was her grandfather, James, holding a terrified girl. Her finger trembled on the trigger. Fire, Blackwood barked. Couldn't. The others fired, the target dropped, the buzzer blared. Blackwood's voice was ice. Artemis 4, fail. That night sat alone in the armory, dismantling her rifle with shaking hands. The steel blurred under her tears. Walker entered quietly, for once without arrogance. He leaned against the doorway, studying her. You saw something, he said, not a question. Forced her voice steady. I hesitated. Yeah, Walker said softly, but you didn't miss. She looked up sharply. His eyes were serious, stripped of mockery. They're pushing you harder than the rest of us, he continued. I don't know why, but I've seen guys get chewed up by this place. You don't bend, you break. And once you break, they don't put you back together. His voice cracked. So what am I supposed to do? Walker's smirk flickered, then faded. Figure out who you're shooting for, them or yourself. For the first time, saw not just a rival but a man trapped in the same machine. The following day, pulled her aside during drills. They're monitoring you more than the rest of us, she whispered. Extra scans, extra notes. Do you know why? Hesitated, then lied. No. studied her with sharp, knowing eyes. Be careful, doesn't invest unless he's planning to own you. That evening, himself appeared at the range. His polished shoes looked absurd in the dust, but no one dared laugh. He watched silently as Artemis' squad performed a series of impossible shots, moving targets at distances beyond reason. When it was turn, size never left her. 2,800 meters, Walker called, setting the scope. Wind cross 15, mirage heavy. Lay prone. The desert air shimmered, time slowed. She heard her grandfather's voice whisper the corrections. Left, half-mil high, breathe. She fired. The distant steel target rang with a clear, impossible chime. The range went silent, smiled. Later, she was summoned to his office. "Do you know what makes a sniper truly effective?" he asked, packing slowly. "Not skill, not even instinct. It's loyalty to the mission, to command, to me." Said nothing. "You carry your grandfather's gift," continued. "But unlike him, you will not waste it on doubt. Do you understand?" Her voice was steady, but inside she trembled. "Yes, sir." When she left, warning echoed in her mind. They'll use you like they used him. By week 6, cracks had begun to show. Winters snapped during a night drill, throwing down his rifle, shouting at Walker. Collapsed from heat exhaustion, carried away on a stretcher. Grew more distant, her silence carrying weight couldn't decipher. But cracks were quieter. She dreamed of James nightly, sometimes proud, sometimes dying, always watching. And she began to feel something she feared more than exhaustion, dissociation. As if she wasn't pulling the trigger anymore, her grandfather was. The breaking point came during a live-fire test in a mock city. Blackwood's voice crackled over loudspeakers. "Artemis, clear the sector. Hostiles embedded. Civilians mixed in. Rules of engagement apply." They moved in teams, rifles sweeping alleys and doorways. Targets popped up without warning. Shots cracked. Orders barked. Turned a corner and froze. Through her scope she saw a man kneeling with hands raised. No weapon. His face James's again. "Hostile," Blackwood's voice commanded. His chest tightened. "No," she whispered. "Fire Artemis 4. Her finger refused. Walker's shot cracked beside her. The target fell. The buzzer blared, test over. Back at the barracks, Blackwood confronted her privately. "You hesitate again and you're gone. Do you understand?" Forced herself to nod, but inside she felt something else rising, anger. Not at Blackwood, at Eagle Eye, at the machine twisting her gift into obedience. That night, Walker found her on the roof of the barracks, staring at the desert stars. "You're not breaking," he said quietly. "You're resisting." Looked at him, "And what does that cost?" Walker exhaled, "Everything." For a long time they sat in silence, the desert stretching endless around them. For the first time, felt less alone. The next morning, Blackwood assembled the squad. Her face was unreadable, but her voice carried weight. "Artemis Squad," she said, "your training phase is complete. You are now operational." The room stilled. Shifted uneasily. Winters straightened. His expression didn't change. His chest tightened. "Operational, no longer training. Missions real." Blackwood continued. "Your first assignment will be classified until briefing. You deploy in 72 hours. Entered then, his smile thin, his eyes sharp. "Congratulations," he said softly. "You're no longer students, you're assets." Felt the word sink into her bones. Assets, not people, not soldiers, weapons. And in that moment, she knew her grandfather's ghost hadn't shown her everything yet. Because the real test wasn't the training. It was what came next. Why does the first mission always feel less like a beginning, and more like a test you were never meant to pass? 3 days after the announcement, stood on the tarmac at Air Force Base. The desert night wrapped around them, humming with the engines of a C-130 waiting to take Artemis Squad into the dark. Blackwood briefed them inside the hangar. A map flickered on the screen, mountains, a border, red markers like open wounds. Objective, intercept arms convoy supplying insurgents in northern Syria, she said, voice clipped. Satellite confirms movement through hostile terrain. Local forces cannot engage. You will. Leaned forward, extraction. Air support if necessary, Blackwood replied. But understand this, if you're compromised, official channels will deny your existence. Her eyes swept the squad. Winter's tight-jawed, stoic, unreadable, Walker silent, felt the weight settle in her chest. Assets, not people. They boarded the plane. The cabin vibrated with the steady thrum of engines. Walker checked his rifle with practiced motions, but his eyes kept drifting toward. "You ever been in combat?" he asked quietly. Shook her head. "Don't think," he said. "Just breathe. The math will do the rest." Hours later, the plane dropped them into silence. Parachutes opened against a star-strewn sky. The desert below stretched endless and black. Hit the ground hard, sand filling her boots, the night pressing against her skin. They moved quickly, low, through valleys cut by shadow. Led with uncanny awareness, eyes sweeping terrain with intelligence analyst precision. Carried heavy, steady. Winters muttered numbers under his breath, compulsive like a ritual. Felt her grandfather's presence again, ghost-like, guiding each step. By dawn, they reached high ground. Below, through the morning haze, the convoy appeared. 3 trucks, armed guards, radios crackling faintly through the dry air. "Artemis 4, Blackwood's voice came through the earpiece. "Your primary shooter." His pulse spiked. She dropped prone, rifle steady, scope trained on the lead truck. Through her crosshairs, she saw faces. Young men, weary, unaware of the crosshairs hovering over them. "Targets are hostile," Blackwood said. "Rules of engagement clear." Breathed, but something twisted inside her. Through the scope, one of the guards reached into his pocket, not for a weapon but for a cigarette. Another shifted, adjusting a scarf against the morning chill. Human gestures, not enemy, not monster, just men. Her finger hovered. Blackwood snapped, "Take the shot." The world slowed. She heard her grandfather's voice, "Don't fire unless you know." She exhaled, finger tightening. Walker's shot cracked beside her. The lead driver fell. Chaos erupted. Trucks swerved, guards scrambled, shouts cutting through the desert air. His body reacted before her mind did. Her rifle cracked, 1 shot, 2, 3. Each landed with precision she didn't want to own. Men dropped. Dust swirled. The convoy buckled to a halt. "Move," Blackwood ordered. They descended the ridge, rifles up, swept the rear. Winters secured radios, checked cargo, crates of weapons stamped in Cyrillic. "Confirm objective," reported. But's eyes caught movement. A boy no older than 12 crawled from the cab of the second truck. Wide eyes, face streaked with dust, hands shaking. Not a soldier, just a kid. "Contact," barked, raising his rifle. "Stand down," shouted, stepping between. "He's a witness," Winters argued. "Protocol." His voice cut sharp. "He's a child." For a heartbeat, silence, then Walker's voice. "We're not executing kids." Blackwood's reply crackled in the earpiece, ice cold. "Finish the objective." His chest tightened. "Negative, civilian present." "Artemis 4, Blackwood snapped. "That's an order." The boy trembled, clutching something close. Lowered her rifle slowly, kneeling, voice soft. "It's okay, you're safe." The boy pulled a small photo from his shirt. Family, smiling, alive somewhere far from here. He pressed it into her hand, whispering something in Arabic she couldn't understand. Her throat burned. "We're extracting with the kid," Walker said firmly into comms. Blackwood's silence stretched, then broke with venom. "You've compromised the mission. Get to now." They moved quickly, dust rising around them. The boy clung to his hand as they hiked to the extraction point. When the helicopter lifted them out, the desert shrinking below held the boy close, her rifle across her lap. Back at Nighthawk, the debrief was brutal. Stood at the head of the room, smile thin, eyes sharp. "Artemis 4, he said softly. "Explain why you disobeyed a direct order." His voice was steady, though her hand shook. "He was a civilian." "A witness," corrected. "A liability." "A child," snapped. The silence that followed was suffocating. Leaned closer, his voice low. "Do you know what your grandfather's mistake was?" he asked. "He forgot he was a weapon. He started thinking he was a man. Do not repeat his error." Met his eyes. "Maybe his mistake was trusting you." For the first time, smile faltered. After the debrief, Walker caught up with her in the corridor. "You just painted a target on your back," he warned. Exhaled. "Then I guess I'll keep moving." That night, alone in the barracks, she pulled the boy's photograph from her pocket. The faces stared back at her, frozen in joy. She thought of her grandfather, betrayed by the same machine. She thought of his words. She thought of the impossible shot she might one day be ordered to fire at someone who didn't deserve it. And she knew, with bone-deep certainty, that the line she refused to cross was the same one that had cost James his life. The question now was whether she could survive crossing. Because war wasn't just fought in deserts or jungles, it was fought in the soul. What if the shot that defined you wasn't about distance, or even the target, but about who you chose to be when everything was on the line? 2 weeks after Syria, could feel the walls closing in at Nighthawk. Eyes lingered too long during debriefings. Blackwood's tone cut sharper with every order. Even, careful and precise, had pulled her aside one evening with a single whispered warning. "They're testing how far you'll bend. Don't let them break you." But already knew she'd crossed a line wouldn't forgive. Saving that boy had branded her with something worse than failure: defiance. The summons came at midnight, his voice through the intercom calm and final. "Command center." She dressed quickly, boots heavy on the corridor floor. The others slept or pretended to. Walker's eyes cracked open as she passed, silent, a warning unspoken. The command center glowed sterile under cold lights. Weighted, hands folded, a file on the table. Beside him stood Blackwood, unreadable. "We have an operation," said. "High value, one that requires your unique capabilities." A map flickered on the screen, Eastern Europe, a nameless city etched in grayscale. "Target," continued, "is a former operative gone rogue. Spectre. He possesses intelligence that compromises multiple programs, including Eagle Eye." Studied the file. The photo showed a man in his late 60s, weathered face, gray hair. Her heart lurched. She masked the reaction instantly, but inside her chest, panic clawed. "Spectre must be neutralized," said. "You'll deploy within 12 hours. One shot clean, your grandfather would be proud." The words twisted like a knife. Knotted voice even, understood. She left the room with the file clutched tight. In the shadows of the barracks, Walker was waiting. "What did they give you?" he asked. She hesitated, then handed him the photo. Walker's jaw tightened. "I know that name. He's not rogue. He's the guy who warned you, isn't he?" Exhaled. "He's the only one who's told me the truth." Walker's gaze hardened, "Then just sent you to bury it." The flight was silent. Joined the mission as spotter, as security, Walker as backup. Winters stayed behind, his absence unexplained. They landed in darkness, moving through abandoned buildings until the city unfolded below. A maze of rooftops, windows, alleys. Through her scope scanned, there. Crossing a square, coat collar up, moving with the wariness of a man who had lived hunted. "Target acquired," said softly. "Range," whispered. 2,100 meters, wind east steady. It should have been simple, one breath, one squeeze. But her finger froze. Through her scope paused, as if he knew, as if he felt her eyes. Slowly he turned his face toward her. For a heartbeat, their eyes locked across the impossible distance. And he shook his head. Her grandfather's voice echoed inside her. Finish it, Em. But what was it? Killing, or breaking the chain that had already claimed James' life? His voice pressed, take the shot. Her breath caught. No, whispered. Walker's voice hissed in her earpiece. What are you doing? I'm not their weapon, she said. In that moment, movement exploded below. Black SUVs screeched into the square. Men poured out, armed, tactical, efficient. Men. Ambush, muttered. They're here to clean it up. Gunfire cracked, dove for cover, pulse thundered. Walker's voice was urgent. If you don't take the shot, they'll kill him anyway. She exhaled, time slowed, the world narrowed. Her grandfather's whisper, one shot, impossible but necessary. Adjusted, heart steady. The distance stretched farther than anything she'd attempted. Wind screamed. Chaos erupted below. She fired. The bullet cut through the night like destiny. Across 2 kilometers of air, it struck not but the SUV behind him. The vehicle exploded, fire blooming across the square. The shockwave scattered men, buying seconds to escape into the shadows. Silence fell inside scope. Then's voice flat, you missed. Lowered the rifle. No, she said softly, I didn't. They exfiltrated under chaos. The square burned behind them. Men combed streets but was gone. Back at Nighthawk's fury was quiet, which made it worse. You hesitated again, he said coldly. You disobeyed orders, you compromised the mission. Met his eyes, I made a choice. You were given no choice, he snapped. That's the problem, she said. For the first time, silence cracked control. His smile faltered. Later in the barracks, Walker found her packing quietly. You're not coming back, are you? He asked. Shook her head. We'll never stop. If I stay, I become him. If I leave, maybe I finish what Grandpa started. Walker's smirk flickered, but his eyes carried something heavier. Then go, but make the shot count. She slipped out that night, leaving behind Nighthawk, Artemis Squad, and the machine that had tried to own her. Weeks later, headlines whispered of a convoy destroyed, of insurgent leaders killed by a single unseen round. Others spoke of a man known only as Falcon, an operative who appeared, struck, and vanished. But didn't read them. She sat on the porch of ranch, the mountain stretching eternal before her. Michael fixed fence posts in the distance. Her mother hummed softly in the kitchen. The foreclosure notice had been delayed, money wired anonymously with no explanation. In her lap, the boy's photograph from Syria. Beside it, her grandfather's journal, worn and waiting. Sometimes she still heard his voice, but now it wasn't a command, it was a reminder. The shot isn't the point, Em. The choice